Welcome to the Squared Circle Pit with your host, Rob Pasbani.
Now entering the Squared Circle Pit, he is one half of the MLW Tag Team Champions and the current Circle 6 World Champion. It's a long time coming. We have Matthew Justice, entering the pit. Welcome, sir.
How you doing, Rob, man? Thank you for having me here. I'm always in the pit, so it feels good to finally make it to the Squared Circle Pit.
That's right, and I love that your name even has a metal reference. I learned that the Justice portion is a tribute to Metallica's classic release, And Justice for All.
That's right, man. When I first started wrestling, my name is Matt. I always wanted to go by my real name. I didn't want to have 3 or 4 fake names, and my favorite band at the time, Metallica, well, still is, but And Justice for All, my favorite album, came out the year I was born. So Matthew Justice, that's it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I definitely want to get into all that, how you got into metal, how you got into wrestling. I mentioned you are the Circle 6 World Champion. Circle 6 is bringing back the King of the Deathmatch, a huge event later this month. And I hear you have a special announcement. Let's get it rolling. Who is your opponent going to be at this big Circle 6 event?
On December 30th in Los Angeles at Circle 6 King of the Death Matches, I will be defending my Circle 6 World Championship against none other than the notorious 187 Homicide.
Oh, wow.
And that's a first time ever singles match for me. I've never fought Homicide ever. So it's going to be a real test.
You have to really up your fork defense game with Homicide.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep my forehead pretty, you know what I mean? So
gotta do a lot of...
I haven't done a very good job of it. So
I want to talk about the deathmatch stuff too, because this stuff is very painful. You see the marks it leaves instantaneously, and I'm curious which weapon hurts the most. Like, which is the worst thing to take?
Well, for me, I consider myself more of like a hardcore extreme wrestler. ECW is what really got me, but I have done death matches. I don't do them all the time. So for me, I hate the glass. They don't necessarily hurt on impact, but the cuts, the scars, I think those are the worst. But I think the worst weapon in death matches has to be gusset plates. If you've ever seen someone get a gusset plate pounded into their arm or their forehead, because those are for framing lumber to hold trussing together, and they literally get them pounded into their skull or their arm or their body, and they have to be like pried out. And sometimes people use Japanese, their tenzins, to hold flower arrangements together, but they're like little circles. I think those suck too. But a gusset plate is a giant rectangle piece of metal that gets literally pounded into your skin, your skull. It's terrible.
And that's like 50 cuts at once, right? Like that's just 50.
That's like all these holes at one time just being driven into you. Far beyond driven, way too much for me, man.
And, I've talked to Eat the Turnbuckle, and they mentioned that it's not necessarily in the moment that it hurts. Like you said, it's like 2 days later with the scabs and everything. That's when
it's really Wednesday morning, man. That's it. It's like, yeah, shout out to Slack, man.
Exactly. So let's take it back. Let's take it to the beginning. I want to know, did you first get into pro wrestling or did you first get into heavy metal?
Wrestling for sure. Probably when I was... I have to be 3 years old, 2 years old. I remember seeing wrestling on TV in 1990 when I would go visit my grandma. And I would go to Toys R Us, and I'd always have to get a new wrestling figure. When I was little, I slept with a Sting wrestling buddy, a WCW one. So I think that came out in 1990, and I had it. So that was when I was 2. That sounds crazy, but I've had a Sting wrestling buddy that I still have in a tote in my room. His arms are ripped off from me slamming him, throwing him around, learning how to be a wrestler. I mean, metal came after that. When I was young, I had AC/DC albums and Kiss albums and things like that. And then, that opens up the portal, the wormhole, and you go down it. And then I found Metallica and thrash, and then I found Pantera, and then it just, continued on the spiral from there.
Did you have like older brothers or sisters that like guided you, or was it your parents that were into rock, or how did it work?
I'm the oldest child. My mom liked Pink Floyd and Bob Seger, and my dad was a country boy. So if I was in the car with my mom, it was kind of just whatever morning radio was, and my dad was always country or sports radio. So the metal, I honestly think I got the metal from wrestling a little bit too, because once I found ECW on syndicated 2 a.m. TV, you know, you're turned on to that culture, and then you start hearing the music and on that show. So
that's same for me. That's kind of how I got into a lot of hard rock and metal, was just specifically through ECW, not necessarily.
Yeah,
WWE.
literally. I mean, any type of like alternative subculture is like, I definitely got it from wrestling, or some symbiosis between the music and the wrestling for sure, man.
Now I'm guessing you were kind of young when ECW was going around. Did your parents see you watching this stuff and be like, what the hell are you? You're a kid. You shouldn't be watching this.
Well, luckily, like I said, it came on this before they got on TNN, where I grew up. It came on at 2 a.m. So luckily we had a TV in the back room at my house. I could turn it on, or if I was at a friend's house on a sleepover, his parents or his dad didn't care. So that's where we did a lot of our seeking out of obscure wrestling late at night. Because my one friend I had when I was young, his dad didn't care what we did. We would wrestle in his living room. We'd bring all the weapons from the shed into their living room at night, and we'd be hitting each other with ladders watching ECW. And once ECW wasn't on syndication anymore, they aired like NWA Wildside, HWA, Heartland Wrestling was on. So like this channel specifically would have whatever syndicated wrestling was out there to pick up, and it was always on at like 2 a.m. So after ECW failed, it had it had everything on there. So
this
that's
was an Ohio station?
Yeah, it's WU what was it? It was called The Cat. That's just some
awesome.
The big show on there was like The Ghoul, which I'm sure if anyone from the Ohio area, they'll be like, oh, The Ghoul. You see these shitty commercials for it at, all hours of the day on TV.
There were some pretty memorable ECW pay-per-views from Ohio. I believe Heat Wave would come around.
Hera Arena in Dayton, Ohio.
Dayton.
98 and 99. It was at the Hera Arena in Dayton.
Did you ever make it down? Did you ever see ECW live?
No, I was never fortunate enough to see ECW live. They came to Cleveland. The last time they came here, I think, was 2000. So they came to the Agora Theater in Cleveland. That's closer to where I grew up at. And they came to Youngstown area, I think, maybe twice, to Niles, Ohio, which that was 2001, and I didn't make it. I think I went to my first indie show in 2003 or 2004. I was in high school, and one of my buddies, his girlfriend, got her driver's license, so we would get her to take us to these indie shows, and we'd watch. And that was at Cleveland All Pro Wrestling, where I ended up a couple years later starting to train and became a wrestler. So
nice. Before we get to that, who were your guys in ECW? Who were your favorites coming up?
Rob Van Dam and Sabu right off the rip. I mean, Taz, absolutely. Anyone that Fonzie managed, obviously, Fonzie, he's the man. The whole ECW roster has a little bit of to say, but definitely Van Dam, Sabu, Taz. Sandman's all, my dog is named Sandman. You heard him barking earlier before we started. So that's a little bit of Enter Sandman from Metallica and Sandman the wrestler. I'd say more Metallica. I'm not giving Sandman the wrestler the credit for my dog, but
so it seems like you're a big Metallica guy. Like, tell me about your fandom. Do you remember discovering them and diving into it?
Yeah, I think the first CD I bought was Kill 'Em All. I think the first two like heavy metal CDs that I burned through, just wore out on a CD player when I was in maybe middle school, high school, was Kill 'Em All by Metallica and Paranoid, Black Sabbath. And I had a little moon share in my bedroom growing up, and I would sit in that thing in the miserable cold winters, and I would just be under a blanket with my headphones on, and I would just wear those albums out, man. And especially Metallica. I mean, James Hetfield, he was a very early inspiration for me. I mean, he's an idol to me still. Phil and Samo and James Hetfield are definitely like my two most, I don't want to say I idolize these guys, but I definitely have used their lives to guide myself through my own, some of the things they've experienced and the successes that they've managed. So Metallica was definitely first though, and just the whole young metal attack and just I, you know,
Yeah, I mean, Kill 'Em All.
love him,
That's a
man.
great. That's a great first taste. Like I got in, the mainstream route through like Enter Sandman, and then all the singles, and then eventually, what really got me into Metallica, funny enough, was Sting coming out to Seek and
Seek and
Destroy.
Destroy, yeah, man.
And my friend was like, "See, dude, there's way heavier Metallica songs. You got to get into the early stuff." And I was like, "Yeah, I gotta really dive in now." And then that's when I really, really got into them.
Yes, the first album that came out when I was like old enough to go to the store on my own and buy it was Saint Anger. So I bought Saint Anger at Kmart when it came out in 2003, right? So I
Yeah.
was in that was the summer between eighth grade and high school for me, eighth grade and ninth grade. And I would ride my bike to Kmart and buy wrestling figures or whatever it was. And I bought Saint Anger. So I thought Saint Anger was sweet because it came out, I bought it and I enjoyed it. It was like, special to me. But I'd previously had Kill 'Em All, and then I think after Kill 'Em All, I got Master of Puppets. So those were the first two. But Saint Anger definitely, I had a soft spot for it, but I still like it. It's
Oh yeah, okay. So
yeah.
that's interesting. Like I actually just recently re-listened to it. Saint Anger is around the time when, like, in the promo to Saint Anger was when I was the biggest Metallica fan, just because they were all over MTV and like
Oh yeah.
everyone was hyping up their legacy. So that's when I was like really diving in and listening to Ride the Lightning like every day basically, and and so I was so hyped up on Saint Anger that when it came out, it really disappointed me, and I didn't really like. I listened to it twice, and then I never listened to it until recently. I went back, and there's actually a lot of really good riffs on there. There's a few good songs, like there's a few skeletons of good songs.
Oh,
like
yeah.
if they edited down the 8 minutes to 3 minutes, it would be a great new like 90s era Metallica.
There's
song,
a video, or at least there used to be on YouTube, where someone went through and made Saint Anger sound like "And Justice for All" era Metallica. Everything, every instrument, and the vocals. It's amazing, dude. And maybe like you got to listen to that because it totally changes it.
What are some of the songs that stand out for you on Saint Anger that you like, if you remember?
The Unnamed Feeling, great
Oh
song,
yes,
dude.
that was the one that
opening riff,
we were
dude.
all like,
Frantic is, Saint Anger and Frantic is, aside from being just like a run on of 8 minutes, maybe this song could have been like 4 or 5 minutes and cut down.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not Metallica. They do what they want to
Yeah.
do for a reason. That's how I feel. I like, if I ever want to put out the Lulu era of my wrestling career, I'm gonna do it because of the people that have inspired me. Like, I'm not gonna. I don't business. Obviously, I want to make money. I want to get taken care of for what I do, but I also want to do what I want to do. Most importantly, so I love that about
Yeah.
bands like Metallica. So
yeah, and I feel like the idea that they could edit themselves down, that critique has followed them even to their most recent album. I feel like there's some songs on the new one where it's like, okay, this doesn't need to be an 8-minute song. This could be a 3-minute, a 4-minute song. But you're right, like you said, it's like they can do whatever the hell they want.
yeah, and I imagine too in their minds when they're like, well, we got to be Metallica. Being Metallica is for writing some 7-8 minute bangers. So
Yeah,
it's
right,
one of-
right. And they just played this summer. They did a huge stadium tour with Pantera. I went to see it, and I heard that you went to see it as well. And I was very, very impressed with Metallica. Just like the whole presentation, like it felt like a huge wrestling pay-per-view with the screens and everything. And honestly, like that part of the presentation is what was most impressive. Like this is a main event stadium show that they're not just 4 guys on a stage, like, because that's the thing with the stadium. Most people are so far away. You need to give them more visuals to get them distracted because you just look like a dot from where most
an
people are
ant
standing.
on a little fucking circle,
Right. So I think they did an incredible job. I did not pick up my cell phone once, and I have huge ADD when it comes to shows. So they did a really good job of capturing my attention. What was your thoughts on the show?
I think I've been to every Metallica tour since the 2000, whenever the Madly and Anger with the World Tour. So maybe 2004, the year after the album. And I mean, all their tour setups are pretty crazy. They've gotten more lights, more screens every time. I think the Worldwide tour I saw in football stadiums. I saw that at the Baltimore Ravens stadium, and but it was an end stage where the stage was at the end of the football field, and they still had the big trussing and the screen and everything. But this was beyond, with the circle stage in the center of the football stadium. Then they had the giant trussing around it. They had like 6 or 8 huge towers with lights and video the whole time. It was amazing. And they actually, the performance was great. The sound was great, but the visual presentation, like for Pantera, I saw the last tour date in Detroit. So November 10th. And for Pantera, they leave the house lights on in the stadium. So they still have the screens going a little bit, but not a lot of production value to it. Just kind of them on the stage, which is weird because 4 dudes on this giant sea of people, it's like kind of hard to pay attention when you're on one side of it and they're all the way on the other side. But for Metallica, they turn the house lights off and they have so much stuff going on that even when the band's over there, you still have something to soak in over here. It's very cool. And how they do it, it's like their 2-hour set. It's like they play a half hour over in this corner, a half hour in this corner, a half hour here, a half hour here. That's a genius, you know? And so they're kind of like, I got at least half the show right up. I was about the 4th row. It was amazing, man.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I saw them in the summer more because it's only weekends, so they stretch it out over a month.
Yeah, it's hard, which is hard because for wrestling, the shows are always on the weekends. But I had that on my wrestling calendar. I went to see Pantera 3 times on their own tour, aside from the one they did with Metallica. Yeah, this year I saw Incarceration Fest. That was in July, and then I saw their first tour date with Lamb of God, the start of their tour, and then one more randomly. So, but I had those in my calendar, like in my wrestling calendar, like those are dates that I'm going to see these shows regardless, you know?
Yeah. So when I saw it, like Pantera was during the daytime, even like the sun hadn't even set yet. Cause you know, it's the show starts super early and it was still
summer. It started at 6 p.m. I think I walked in at 6:30 and a new level was hitting. And I was like, oh my God, I got to get in there. Like, you know, I was in the concourse listening to a new level, but I had seen them 3 times. So I was like, okay, it's fine. But
yeah. And like, to your point, you know, I don't think they got the same amount of speakers that Metallica did because I could not hear Zakk Wylde at all. I felt like his guitars were totally down in the mix, and it was just all Rex, which I love Rex, but I want to hear those riffs.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like they didn't. I mean, they sounded like Pantera, but it didn't have the same feeling that it had at their independent dates, their own tour dates that they were doing. And obviously, I mean, Metallica is Metallica, so it's their show.
Yeah, but the Metallica presentation was incredible.
Unreal, man. The lasers and the lights, everything about it, man. And they used to do the beach balls. Like, I think they started that on the Deathmatch tour. They'd have these little beach balls fall down. But I think they got hip to, like, I have like 3 or 4 of them. You catch them and you deflate them and take them home as a souvenir. Now they did it at the show I went to for Seek and Destroy, and they dropped these giant, like, they're bigger than a person beach balls. So no one can even put their arms around them. You can just keep them bouncing. So it's awesome. The whole time, the whole song, the whole like last 2 songs, there's just balls flying around everywhere. It's awesome.
Yeah, and the stamina that they have to play for 2.5 hours, running a half a mile around that stage. It's huge, very, very impressive. Yeah.
And especially like, I mean, Lars is going. How old are these guys? 60. They're all in their 60s.
They're all 60s. Now, right? Yeah, they're all around 60 years old. Yeah.
It's
great.
Insane,
it's wild,
man.
Yeah, I imagine like doing a 2-hour live show like that is the equivalent of a very painful.
That's why they're doing it in NFL stadiums, man, because they're basically like it's any given Sunday for them, man. I'm sure they go hit the trainer's room afterwards, and it's all about that's why they play on the weekends, probably because they need all week to recover and be able to give that performance every single night, you know.
Yeah, and James even needs a day because they would do 2 nights in a venue, but they would never book the Saturday. So James has a vocal break, I bet.
Yeah.
2 hours of screaming, like that's intense. That kills your voice. But yeah, they did it right. It was very, very impressive to see the Metallica machine rolling and just how incredible they are. Like they're not just the biggest metal band in the world. They're one of the biggest bands in the world, period.
Of all time, too.
Yeah. And you kind of forget that sometimes until you see it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, until you go to the show, like one of these big tour dates, and then you look around and you're like, oh, there's a lot of regular people here. And I don't mean regular people like it's a bad thing, but when you're just like a metalhead and a pro wrestler, you're in these, I don't want to weird, but you're in these underground subcultures. And then you go and you see, you know, the mom and pop with their family at the Metallica show. It's a different world.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you completely. Like 90% of the people at that show, that's probably the only show they're going to this year, if even next 3 years, you know, like, so
that's why there's 80,000 people at those Metallica shows.
Yeah, but let's change gears back to wrestling a bit. You mentioned in high school you wanted to be, like, did you decide in high school you wanted to be a wrestler? When was that moment for you that you wanted to do this?
Yeah, this the summer between my sophomore and junior year of high school is when I finally went to start training to be a pro wrestler. I would get my mom, thankfully, God bless her, she would drive me like 40 minutes to the west side of Cleveland, and she would sit in the parking lot for 2 hours and let me train. So I think every Friday she was able to take me, and that was 2005 at first that I first went. And then I stopped for a little bit because during football season, my dad's always been a high school football coach my whole life. So my mom wouldn't be able to take me on Fridays anymore. But once I got my driver's license, I went back. So 2006, I went back and finished my training. I had my first match in September of 2006. So I was a junior in high school. We had just went back to school for my junior year. And I mean, I quit playing sports. I was on the basketball team, soccer team. I played soccer because my dad was a football coach. It was always pushed down my throat. So I played soccer to do something different.
So you were always an athletic kid, it sounds like.
I mean, like I said, I grew up with a dad who played sports my whole life. He was a sports coach, gym teacher, which is, is the best thing that could ever happen for me because that was pushed on me my whole life, sports, athletics, the regimen that goes into practice and training and being perfect or making yourself feel like you have to be perfect.
So then you start training as a junior, and then when was your first match was as a junior?
September of 2000. Yep. So then for the last 2 years of high school, man, everyone else, whatever they did on the weekends, party or be kids, I would be driving 6 hours to West Virginia to make literally a hot dog and a handshake or maybe $20 or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what I've been doing.
And you loved it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why I, even in 10th, 11th grade, was having my mom take me to train to be a pro wrestler, not doing whatever else kids were doing. And it's all I've been doing my entire adult life since. So if you think I started wrestling when I was 17, I don't even think I was fully like an evolved adult man yet. I was just, becoming a man. And that's all I've done my whole adult life. I've never stopped. It's been 18 years now, or going on 18 years.
Did you always know it would be full time, or were you still, when you were like a junior and a senior, where you're like, oh, maybe like I'm going to do this as a side thing while I?
No, I was dead set on when I first started wrestling. I wanted to make it to WWE. That was the only, in the early 2000s, that was the only thing really. That was the only way to be successful. So that was my mindset the whole time. And I did eventually get signed to WWE in 2011. I was in FCW, their developmental brand. So, I mean, I've just been dead set, focused on that. I think I really knew since I was a kid. Obviously, I just have been vision questing and jumping off sheds, getting hit with ladders and weapons, and just, I love it. So
I do admire that, the WWE thing didn't work out. And for a lot of people that would be defeating, but I'm sure you realize I
quit WWE. When developmental, I was 22 when I got signed, and then I turned 23 and I moved to Florida. That was the first time I ever moved out of my house. I was 22, 23, and I moved to Tampa, Florida. That's where FCW was at the time. And I would say looking back, I probably wasn't ready. I just was so dead set and determined on making it to WWE. I did 2 tryouts at OVW and I did 2 tryouts at FCW, the second one, which I got signed from. And it's like my experiences in life were not enough to just have me go out on my own for the first time and then be thrown into this like high pressure, high level situation of being in developmental. I don't think I really fathomed where it could have taken me at that time. I was just more of like a stubborn, hard-headed, well, I still am those things, but I was just a stubborn, hard-headed kid, and I didn't want to listen to anyone tell me anything. So I quit. But the thing is I quit. I didn't quit wrestling. I just literally, like, as soon as I don't think I had a 90-day no compete clause, but maybe it was like a 30 days that they paid me for, even though I quit, which is great. So I think like as soon as I could, it was like the 30th day I went and wrestled at, a company I had wrestled for in Pennsylvania before I got signed. So it's been right back to pro wrestling. That's what it always was for me. I never wanted to be a sports entertainer. That's the thing. All my dreams were dead by the time I was in WWE. Like even Money in the Bank, it was a pay-per-view. It wasn't a match at WrestleMania anymore. It was a pay-per-view event. And like that was probably the only thing that still really fits my, like, not that I don't want to be in that big grand stage, but there's got to be something there that's keeping it real for me in my heart. So
Yeah, so it's interesting because you had this dream as a kid, and then once you're an adult, and you're on the path to the dream, you start to reassess. Like, wait, is this what I want? Like, what did this 15-year-old kid know about what I'm doing with my
Yeah,
life?
I only saw what I was seeing on the surface, the facade of it. But I even like I think back to watching like ECW. It's like, if I knew all the damage it was going to do to me, the how much it takes out of me to be a wrestler and to do this for as long as I have, it's like, of course, that's not what I was thinking or seeing when I was 10 years old. You just see I would say the beauty of it, but whatever it was that drew me to it.
So, like when you leave WWE, you're just like, I'm going to do this my way. I know, and also there's more opportunity, on the indies at that. Like the indies are flourishing a little more.
I really even wasn't in 2011.
Oh, yeah?
I mean, I was I was only there for a year, so it was just the year of 2011. It wasn't like it is now. Maybe it was starting to be. I know after Ring of Honor was starting to kind of take off. I remember being in WWE watching like Kevin Steen and El Generico and the Briscoes on Ring of Honor pay-per-views just to watch wrestling and be motivated for wrestling while I was in developmental. So it was definitely starting to, but I think it was a couple years later, maybe 2013, 2014. That's, I feel like, when like the evolved style of wrestling started popping up, and they started like Dragon Gate evolved, and then all the
Right.
indies like CZW probably started getting, well, all the companies that popped up now, I think started in those like a couple years after I left WWE for sure.
So at what point did you feel comfortable in like being like, yeah, I'm a full-time professional wrestler that works for himself, like I am an independent contractor. Like how long did it take you to get to that point?
I'd say probably the last like 5 years I've felt like that. Maybe since 2019.
So it took a while.
So yeah, I mean,
about
after
8 years.
WWE, I moved around a little bit. I moved home. I moved to New York City. So it was like I moved home. I started wrestling again in Ohio, where I was from. I moved to New York City. I started wrestling a lot there, or places around there, just kind of territorial. But I moved back home again to my hometown in 2013, and I started a gym. I built my own gym, a 24-hour gym that I owned for 5 years. So I did that. So I was never really like, I was always doing something for myself, by myself. But I didn't wrestle a whole lot. Like I'd wrestle maybe 2 or 3 times a month here and there when I owned a gym, which that's still regularly. I wrestled, or at least once a week, probably I'd have a show, but just more local stuff. It wasn't anything really, nothing big, there's no buzz or anything to it really.
What was it like living in New York? Obviously, you come from Ohio, New York. I imagine this. I live in Brooklyn. I grew up here, but I imagine as someone coming over, it's a little bit.
Yeah,
of
it was a whirlwind,
shock.
man. That's why I moved there, because I wanted, I moved to Tampa before that. That was the first time I left home, and I wanted to have that experience of something different. Plus, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere, right? I lived in the Bronx. I fortunately found it. I moved for a girlfriend at the time, and we lived in the Bronx in Pelham Bay. So it was a nice. I used to ride the 6 train into Midtown Manhattan every day. I worked at a restaurant in Bloomingdale's. I delivered food. I rode my bike throughout. I don't know. I just remember riding down Park Avenue on my bike, dodging taxis, delivering food to wealthy people. But it was cool, man.
That's
New York,
a fun experience. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, it definitely teaches you a lot about life and society. Living in a big giant city like New York, the hustle and bustle of it, the melting pot of the different people and the places they come from there. So New York City is awesome.
Yeah.
It's always still, when I go back there, it's always going to be, there's a part of me that a period of my life that was my home. So it means something to me. And actually, I'm wrestling in New York this coming Thursday, December 7th at Melrose Ballroom in Queens for Major League Wrestling.
Nice.
So I have a big match with a longtime foe, Joshua Bishop. He just joined the World Titan Federation, which is they're a invading force in MLW right now. So me and my
trying to bring sports entertainment to
MLW. Exactly. And if you've listened to this, even just this past interview, you realize sports entertainment isn't necessarily for me. So I'm going to battle on the 7th for MLW and for myself against Josh Bishop. So that's going to be a good one. MLW.com for any information on MLW. Obviously, I am the MLW Tag Team Champions at their last pay-per-view, Fightland. Me and my second-year crew brother, one called Manders, defeated the Calling to win the titles. So.
And yeah, what was it? You know, I don't know if it was your first time at the 2300 Arena, but wrestling at the ECW Arena. I mean, I never made it to the ECW Arena on the first run. I saw plenty of shows here in New York at Elks Lodge, and I went to the last shows at Hammerstein, which were so awesome. Insane.
Was it Guilty as Charged 2001 or
yeah.
On,
that one and the Nightmare
Massacre on 34th Street?
Massacre on 34th Street and the Guilty, the December and the January show, their last two shows.
Awesome.
They were so sick, and it was like the January show was almost like, you know, a memorial, because you kind of knew this was like the last fucking ECW show, but it was so fun. And he got RVD to come out.
Triple threat ladder match with Sandman, Justin Credible, and Sandman. And
Carino. Carino, Sandman, Justin Credible, and then Rhino came in at the end. Yeah.
And then afterwards they do the Jerry Lynn Van Dam match.
Yeah, the Jerry Lynn Van Dam match was just like, you know, it's so wild watching those now. Like that match, those matches could happen now and they would still be ahead of their time. Like they were so crazy.
Jerry Lynn and Rob Van Dam, that's the match that made me want to be not like a little kid. You want to be a wrestler. You see the Macho Man, you see Hulk Hogan. Jerry Lynn and Rob Van Dam, that is what like the preteen Matthew saw and was like, okay, I actually want to do that. That's the match that I'm sure that is for a lot of wrestlers right now. That style of wrestling, because they did technical wrestling. They were great wrestlers, but they also did hardcore extreme things too. They took some risks. I love that.
I love that. Yeah, they did technical wrestling with a chair. You know.
Yes, exactly. You'll see this. I love that's the one good thing about social media is you'll see someone share some old vintage wrestling clips that I own those on DVD from FYE, every ECW DVD I could find. But and obviously the network or whatever streaming service they're on has them, but they're just chopped down and edited, and all the music and all the great flavor and vibe is gone from it. But seeing those things definitely is what is perfect wrestling to me. It's the best of all anything you could want.
Between you and me, if you do a little Googling, you Google instead of ECW, ReCW, like ReCW.
Yeah.
Somebody went and redubbed all the WWE Network high quality things with the VHS version of like all of those entrance themes and the commercials. Right. So it's like the high end footage, but with Natural Born Killers playing or whatever. Yeah.
I have from when I first started training, I bought a guy in the local promotion that I first started at. He had all the ECW pay-per-views recorded on VHSs that he transferred to DVDs. And I bought copies of all. So I have every pay-per-view and like a couple years of hardcore TV on DVDs, but they're like dubbed, redubbed. So they're not great quality. And also, I don't even know if my laptop, if it works anymore, will play DVDs properly. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
But so that's awesome.
If they're
just up on, it's on YouTube, or is it on? Well,
so it's on the Internet Archive. So it's like another, but it's streaming and you can download it. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to check that out, man. That's instant access.
Yeah. It's really, really cool. So yeah, but what was it like stepping into the 2300 Arena, the ECW Arena for the first time? How did it feel?
I'd been there before, I think in 2011, right before I got signed to WWE, I did an ROH tryout. And the first day of the trial, like the day before the tryout, you were allowed to come to the TV tapings at the arena. And that was the only time I'd really been there before. But finally this year, in February of 2023, I made my MLW debut at the ECW Arena. And that was the first match I'd ever had in the ECW Arena. And it was in a dumpster match. I ended up winning the match by elbow dropping out of the ring from the top of a ladder onto someone across the dumpster. Like, that's my first experience at the ECW Arena. And then every MLW show since basically has been back at the ECW Arena if we're not in New York. So it's like I did a cage match. It was a Chamber of Horrors match for MLW that was in September, I think it was. Yeah. And then just in October, I had basically a TLC match in the ECW Arena. So, I mean, this is like, I'm just checking all my childhood dreams all over again through MLW at the ECW Arena, and it's amazing.
Yeah, and I feel like you're always jumping off something.
Oh yeah, I love it,
Anytime
man.
I say imagine, you're like, was this something you would do as a kid? Like just no fear of heights. You always like to see
Yeah,
how far
I
you can
always
climb up.
I really liked roller coasters growing up. So I mean, obviously going fast and going high. I like I said, I did in fifth grade. Me and my buddy, we would jump off the shed. We'd backyard wrestle. We would wrestle in his living room at 2 a.m. while we were watching ECW on syndication. And I mean, the music I like is extreme. The wrestling I like is extreme. I really love Hunter S. Thompson, his writing. He's pretty extreme. So, I mean, if you just put it all together, buy the ticket, take the ride. That's what I live for, man. The thrill. Like the movie Point Break rolled in with that too. You know, if you want the ultimate, if you want the ultimate, you got to be willing to pay the ultimate price. So,
That's awesome. Well, that's really, really cool. Any also, what are you listening to now? Like, do you seek out new heavy metal? Are you constantly keeping your ear to the ground, or is it more just you have your go tos?
sometimes I feel like I'm an old man and I'm set in stone. Like I just listen to what I listen to. But I feel like there's bands that like have been around and been kind of prevalent and associated with other bands I like, but it just takes a little bit of time. Like I think once I hit 30, I really started loving Clutch. Like I had heard Clutch, I've seen Clutch on shows and festivals, and it never really hit with me. But as soon as I grew out a better beard and turned 30, Clutch, there's just something about it that really hit for me, you know? So like they've been around forever and I didn't get them when I saw them at the Sounds of the Underground Festival in 2005, but I definitely get them now. You know what I mean? So I'm
Yeah.
still like, I still listen to music. Like Spotify. I love it because they play. There's a cheap pop for Spotify, man. No, but I love the playlist and that they play me what I want to hear. But sometimes I also do want to hear new stuff so I can find new things. Because like a lot of these bands I like don't really tour that often. I want to go see shows, so I want to find new stuff that I can get into or things that are going to carry on the spirit of the music that I really like. But that's what I like about when I go see bands like COC or Crowbar. They always have a younger band on opening for them. So I like to see, you know, I like to, I'm more likely to get into a band after seeing them live than I am trying to listen to them on Spotify or on any, like, you know,
Yeah.
from media. So
For me, like you said, with the Sounds of the Underground, that's the first time I saw Clutch too, and I was like, "Oh, I finally get it." It was seeing them live was what made me get into them. Actually, it was just like, "Oh, this is more of a live experience because they're so tight." But it sounds like to me like you like metal with like a bit of a country vibe to it, or
yeah,
like a bit of a southern rock to it.
Leonard Skinner, man, for sure. It's definitely that southern vibe to it, man.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, and it is interesting now seeing like some of these country artists showing love for metal, like Jelly Roll. I feel like he's always hanging out with metal dudes.
Cody Jinks is another guy who's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
country orient, or you know, that kind of outlaw sound
Yeah, like
he
outlaw
has some
country is kind
he
of
has some metal inspirations to him. I think I did security before I was just wrestling. I did security at concerts, and I remember Cody Jinks. All the music before he came on was like COC music I like. I was like, oh, who is this dude? I like this guy, you know.
yeah.
So,
Also, I love that you've had like every peripheral job. It sounds like related to
oh
wrestling,
yeah.
like
Mhm.
security, bouncer, like anything.
Yeah, I did a lot of security doorman, uh, every random gig ever, man. Because regular employment definitely doesn't suit the pro wrestling lifestyle or schedule. But you can definitely be a bouncer and come into work with a black eye and some cuts on your head and all over your body, and it makes your job a little bit easier because no one wants to fuck with you, man.
You just come off like a much tougher guy. That makes sense.
Like,
Well,
do you like think about how I got these? Like, do you really want to try me?
right. Well, you can see Matt Justice cutting himself live in Technicolor this Thursday in New York City at the Melrose Ballroom, MLW.com, and at the end of the month, circle6.co for the King of the Deathmatch in LA. Some bi-coastal beatings happening this
Yep.
holiday season.
From the East Coast to the West Coast, I gotta go. So,
Matt, thank you so much for taking some time and hanging out with me here on Squared Circle. But any final plugs that you want to get in before we go?
I have all my shirts, merchandise available on my website, www.thrashjustice.com. And my social media is at Thrash Justice. So find me on whatever platform you use. Come out, check me out live. Obviously, just like you said about Clutch, I've always been a live band. You're not going to get into me because of some witty tweet I fire out or because I'm making a valiant stand telling everyone how good I am on social media every day like all of my peers do. Just come see me live, and you're going to want to come back, buy the ticket, and take the ride. Thank you, Rob.
Awesome. Thank you.